"That dog just threw himself in front of my truck," I shouted, slamming my palms against the steering wheel as horns erupted behind me. I was already late for work, coffee forgotten, and still steaming in the cup holder, and traffic had just started moving again after a minor fender bender up the road. The last thing I expected to see on a chilly Tuesday morning in December was a soaked, trembling dog standing dead center in the intersection. He wasn't barking or pacing, just standing there, eyes locked on me, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. It didn't even make sense. He wasn't aggressive or scared like most strays you'd see darting across highways. He was shivering, clearly cold, but he held his ground as car horns blared and people yelled. And still, no movement. It was like he didn't care that dozens of impatient drivers were stuck behind me, leaning out their windows to shout. I hit my hazard lights and opened my door. "Hey! Hey, buddy!" I called out, stepping into the biting wind that cut through my jacket like paper. "Come on, it's not safe here." The dog didn't move. Drivers started honking louder, some of them now stepping out of their cars. I heard a woman yell something about calling animal control. A guy in a delivery van behind me shouted, "Just drive around it, it's just a dog." But I couldn't do that. I couldn't just drive around him like he was roadkill. The look in his eyes, it wasn't panic. It was purpose. I walked toward him slowly, palms out. He was big, maybe a golden retriever mix, but matted and dripping wet like he'd been in a river. I could see his ribs through the tangled fur. He looked up at me, and for a second I thought he might bolt. But then he turned and walked away. "Wait, what are you doing?" I muttered, following him instinctively. The street was still frozen in chaos behind me, but the dog didn't look back. He padded toward the shoulder of the road, then down a gravel path I hadn't noticed before, one that led away from the highway and into the woods. I hesitated. Logic said, get back in the car, get to work, and let the county deal with it. But something told me if I left now, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So I followed him. The path was narrow, half muddied with last night's rain, and surrounded by pines. I kept slipping on the wet leaves, my work shoes no match for the terrain. The dog glanced back occasionally, as if to make sure I was still there, then picked up the pace. "Slow down, buddy," I huffed. "I'm not built for cross-country chases." After what felt like 20 minutes, the trees opened up to reveal a tiny wooden bridge, old and half-collapsed. The dog darted across the broken boards, pausing halfway to bark for the first time. "You want me to cross that?" I looked at the planks skeptically, but I took a step. Then another. The wood creaked beneath me, but held. When I reached the other side, the dog took off again, this time down a slight slope, toward what looked like an old storage shed or cabin. It was overgrown, nearly swallowed by weeds and vines, and the door hung crooked on its hinges. The dog stopped there. He barked again, twice, and then sat. "What is it? What's here?" I asked, stepping up beside him. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint I almost thought I imagined it. A tiny whimper. My heart dropped. I reached for the door and tugged it open. It creaked loudly, revealing darkness inside. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. In the far corner, wrapped in a damp sleeping bag, lay a child. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with sandy hair plastered to his forehead and skin pale from the cold. He was curled up, unmoving, but I saw his chest rise and fall. "Hey! Hey, buddy!" I shouted, rushing in and dropping to my knees. "Can you hear me? I'm here to help. You're safe now." The boy didn't respond. He was breathing, but barely. I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around him, then hit 911 on my phone. "There's a child," I told the dispatcher, trying to keep my voice steady. "In a shed off Highway 14. He's freezing and not responsive." And I looked at the dog, still sitting at the door like a sentinel. And a dog led me to him. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Paramedics came, flashing lights lit up the trees, and the boy was rushed into the back of the ambulance. He was alive, they said, but barely, severely dehydrated and hypothermic. They needed to get him to the hospital right away. And the dog, well, he tried to climb into the ambulance after the boy. A paramedic stopped him gently. "He's not allowed in here," the woman said. "We'll take care of the kid, don't worry." But the dog wouldn't leave. I knelt beside him. "You want to go with him, don't you?" He whined softly, eyes locked on the back of the ambulance. "I'll follow them. You can ride with me," I said. I opened the passenger door of my car and he jumped in without hesitation, curling into a wet, muddy ball on the seat. I didn't care about the mess. We followed the ambulance to the hospital, headlights carving through the early morning fog. The dog didn't make a sound the whole way. At the hospital, I was told the boy would be kept in ICU overnight. They needed to monitor his vitals and run tests. No one knew who he was yet. No missing person reports had come in that matched his description. And he was too weak to talk. I sat in the waiting room for hours, the dog at my feet. People gave me odd looks, a soaking wet dog in the hospital lobby, but no one asked us to leave. Eventually, a nurse brought out a bowl of water and a blanket for him. He lapped it up gratefully. "What's his name?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "He found me. Or maybe I found him." She smiled and patted his head. "Then maybe he's just waiting to tell you." By evening, the news had gotten hold of the story. "Hero dog leads man to abandoned child in the woods." I watched it play on the lobby TV, stunned at how fast it spread. I never told them what I said when I first saw him. It didn't feel right. The next day, the boy woke up. He couldn't remember much. Just that he'd been with his dad, that they'd run out of food, and that the dog, whom he called Buck, had stayed with him when his dad went to find help and never came back. The story was far from over. I still didn't know how the boy had ended up alone, why no one was looking for him, or why the dog had trusted me enough to lead me there. But I knew one thing. I wasn't letting Buck out of my sight. Not until we found out the whole truth. And maybe not even then. To be continued. By the time I walked into the hospital the next morning, Buck was already at the sliding doors, sitting like a statue, eyes scanning every nurse and visitor who passed by. I had barely slept. I'd spent most of the night Googling stories about abandoned children, police reports, shelters, anything that might explain how a boy could end up alone in the woods. But nothing matched. The front desk nurse recognized me right away. "You're the guy from the news, right? The one with the dog?" I gave a tired smile. "Guess so. Any update on the boy?" "You just missed the doctor, but the boy's awake. He's still quiet, doesn't say much. Social worker's with him now." Buck whined softly. I looked down and rubbed his ears. "We'd like to see him, if that's okay." She made a call upstairs and nodded. "Room 304, but keep the dog on a leash." I didn't have one, but I promised to hold on to his collar. When we stepped into the room, the boy's eyes lit up. Not at me, but at Buck. "You found him," the boy whispered. His voice was hoarse but clearer than yesterday. Buck rushed to the bedside and laid his head gently on the blanket. The boy smiled for the first time. "Hey, buddy," I said, taking a chair. "Can I ask your name?" He hesitated. The social worker, a woman in her 50s with glasses and a clipboard, encouraged him. It's okay, sweetheart. You can tell him. Eli, he whispered. My name's Eli. Nice to meet you, Eli. I'm Tom. This here's Buck. Well, I guess you already knew that. Eli nodded, eyes never leaving the dog. He stayed with me when Dad left. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Do you know where your dad went? Said he'd come back with food, Eli said. But it got dark. I tried to wait. Buck wouldn't let me leave. The social worker glanced at me. We don't have any matching missing persons reports. No family registered a child named Eli missing. It's like he slipped through the cracks. I looked back at the boy. Where were you before the woods, Eli? Were you at home? He nodded slowly. We were in a truck for a long time. Then a cabin. Then Dad said we had to hide. He got scared. Scared of what? I asked gently. He didn't answer. The social worker stood. We'll give you two a few more minutes, but Eli's in protective custody now. Child Services is coordinating with the police. There are a lot of questions still unanswered. After she left, I said, You know, Buck came right into traffic to find me. Stood right in the road and wouldn't budge until I followed him. That's how I found you. Eli looked up. He waited until he knew someone would care. That hit harder than I expected. I didn't know what came next, what I was supposed to do. I wasn't family. I wasn't a cop or social worker. I was just the guy who followed a dog into the woods. But I couldn't walk away. That afternoon, I went home to shower and change. My house was quiet, tucked in a suburb 20 minutes out of town. It had felt too big ever since my parents passed, and I hadn't done much with the place besides keeping it clean and functional. Buck followed me from room to room like he'd lived there forever. He sniffed at the fireplace, the worn recliner, the carpet near the back door. Then he plopped down in the middle of the living room and let out a long sigh. Well, I said, grabbing a towel. Guess that means you're staying, huh? He thumped his tail. After his bath, which turned my bathroom into a muddy disaster, Buck looked like a different dog. Under all that grime and tangled fur, he had the classic golden coat, deep brown eyes, and a gentle face that said he'd seen too much. I brushed him out, dried him as best I could, and fed him a proper meal. He devoured it like he hadn't eaten in days. I spent the evening trying to piece everything together. The shed in the woods. The way Buck found me. The cabin Eli mentioned. There had to be a trail back to where they came from. So I went back. The next morning, I drove to the same road, parked, and walked down the gravel path Buck had led me through. He was with me again, tail swaying as he navigated the way without hesitation. The bridge creaked beneath us like before, and the shed looked smaller in daylight. I circled it slowly, searching for any clues. Inside, the sleeping bag was still there, now empty. There were crumbs in a plastic bag, an old flashlight, and a worn-out backpack. I picked up the backpack and unzipped it. Inside were a few coloring books, a child's toothbrush, a folded shirt, and a photo. It was a Polaroid. Eli, younger, sitting on a porch with a man who looked tired but happy. The man had rough hands and a day's worth of stubble, his arm draped around the boy's shoulder. "That your dad?" I asked Buck. The dog gave no reaction, just watched me. I took the photo and the bag. There was something else here, something missing. If Eli's dad was still out there, he might be hurt, or worse. I brought the items to the police station. The officer on duty took down everything I said and promised they'd follow up. "You'd be surprised," he said. "A lot of people fall through the cracks. If the dad had a record, or was trying to stay off the grid, there wouldn't be much of a paper trail." "But you'll look for him, right?" I asked. "Of course," he said. We've got people combing the woods, but winter's setting in fast." I hated the idea of waiting. The next few days passed in a blur. Eli stayed in the hospital, then was moved to a foster facility temporarily. I visited every day after work, always bringing Buck with me. Their bond was the only thing keeping Eli grounded. He still didn't say much, but when Buck arrived, his whole face softened. One afternoon, I brought a puzzle with me. We sat at the little plastic table in the visiting room, and Eli started placing pieces without a word. "Your dad," I said gently. "Do you know his name?" Eli nodded. "Travis." "Travis what?" He shook his head. "He said we weren't allowed to use our last name, not even at the clinic." "What clinic?" He paused. "We went there before we hid. Dad said he was sick. They gave him papers." I leaned forward. "Do you remember where it was?" He pointed vaguely. "Big building with glass walls. People wore blue." It wasn't much, but it was something. I asked the social worker if I could speak to the detectives on the case. They agreed to let me in on a conference call later that evening. When I mentioned the clinic detail, they took notes. "We'll check hospitals and urgent care centers within 50 miles, one detective said. "If the dad used a fake name, it might take longer." But that wasn't good enough for me. I called every clinic I could think of the next day during lunch breaks. On the third call, a receptionist paused. "Travis, we had someone by that name here last month. Fit your description. Had a young boy with him. Said he was looking for cancer treatment." My heart skipped. "Do you have a last name?" "Sorry, we can't give that out without a warrant." "But can you give it to the police?" "Absolutely. I'll call the sheriff's department." I hung up and called the detective right away. By evening, they had a name. Travis Meyer. Former construction worker. No recent tax records. Lived off the grid the past 2 years. The pieces were coming together. And the more I learned, the more I felt something else stirring in me. A need to do more. I didn't know Travis. I didn't know what drove him into the woods with a child and a dog. But I knew he loved his son enough to bring a guardian like Buck along. And that meant something. That night, I sat on the couch, Buck curled up beside me, and stared at the photo from the backpack. "We're not done yet," I told him. "We're gonna find out what happened to him. And make sure Eli's never alone again." Buck thumped his tail, just once. And for the first time in days, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. 3 days after they identified Travis Meyer, I was standing in front of a rundown motel 20 miles out of town, Buck by my side, both of us staring at room 6. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of place that made your skin crawl not from fear, but from the emptiness it left behind. The clerk at the desk said Travis and Eli had stayed there a few weeks ago. Paid in cash. Left no ID. Just a name scribbled in the logbook. Travis M. I had no idea what I was doing there. I wasn't a cop. Wasn't family. But I couldn't let it go. Not after what that little boy had been through. Not after the way Buck looked at me every time we drove past the edge of town like he was waiting for me to turn. The motel room had been cleaned since Travis stayed, but the clerk let me look inside. Buck sniffed every corner. He didn't bark or growl, just turned in a slow circle and sat down at the base of the bed. "He knows," I said softly. "He knows they were here." Buck didn't move. He just stared at the closet door. There was nothing inside now, just a wire hanger and a broken zipper from an old bag. But the moment I touched the doorknob, Buck let out a low, drawn-out whine. I closed the door and crouched next to him. "You miss him, don't you?" His ears flicked back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the motel, about the fact that Travis had gone to a clinic and then vanished, leaving his son alone in the woods. Something didn't add up. Nobody leaves their kid behind with nothing unless they don't plan to come back, or unless they can't. I decided to go back to the shed the next morning. There was something about that place that kept pulling me in. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was instinct. Buck jumped into the truck without hesitation, like he already knew where we were going. This time I brought a flashlight, gloves, and a small shovel. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I needed to know if something, anything, had been left behind. The shed was exactly as we'd left it. The sleeping bag gone, the air stale. But as I circled the back again, I noticed something strange near the edge of the foundation. A patch of disturbed dirt, barely noticeable, like someone had tried to cover it up with leaves. Buck sniffed the area, then began pawing gently. I got down on my knees and started digging. It wasn't long before I hit something solid. A metal box. Rusted, but intact. I pulled it out, heart pounding. It wasn't locked, just latched. I flipped it open. Inside were papers, photographs, and a small notebook. A letter sat on top, addressed simply, "To whoever finds Eli." I sat back, hands trembling, and started reading. The letter was from Travis. He explained that he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He hadn't told anyone because he didn't trust the system. Didn't want Eli taken by strangers. Said he and Eli had been moving from place to place, trying to stay off the radar, living out of the truck, camping when they could. He wrote about Buck, how the dog had once belonged to his late wife, and how Buck had become Eli's protector. "If I don't come back," the letter said, "please take care of my boy. Don't let him go into the system. He's all I have left." The notebook was a journal, full of entries that chronicled their journey. Some pages were smudged, the ink blurred from water damage. But the last entry was clear. "I'm going to town. Can't breathe right anymore. Food's low. Eli's coughing too. Buck won't leave him. I told him to stay. If I don't make it back, I hope someone finds them." I sat there for a long time, the letter still open in my hands. Buck lay beside me, head resting on his paws. "He tried," I said quietly. "He really tried." I brought everything to the detective in charge. They took the journal and letter seriously. For the first time, there was a clear picture of who Travis Meyer was. Not just a man who disappeared, but a father trying to do what little he could in a world that didn't leave him many choices. They checked with local clinics again. One doctor remembered him, said he came in, barely able to speak, collapsed in the waiting room. They rushed him to the ER, but he died that same night. No ID. No next of kin. They buried him in a county plot, unmarked, without even knowing his name. "He was right there," I whispered, staring at the copy of the death certificate they gave me. All this time. The next time I visited Eli, I brought the letter. We sat in the rec room, Buck curled up next to his feet, and I handed him the envelope. "This is from your dad. He left it in a box near the shed." Eli looked at it like it was made of glass. He opened it slowly. As he read, he didn't cry. He didn't speak. But he leaned over and wrapped his arms around Buck. Then he looked up at me and said, "He tried his best." "Yeah," I said. "He really did." After that, something shifted. Eli talked more. Not much, and never all at once, but more. About his dad, about the places they'd been, about how Buck would bark at squirrels and steal socks. He started drawing pictures, colorful scribbles of cabins, trucks, dogs, and stars. The social worker told me they were considering placement options. There were distant relatives, people who might be contacted, but nothing solid yet. Is it possible, I asked, heart racing, that I could foster him? Even temporarily? She looked surprised. You're not on any list. You'd have to go through the process. Background checks, training, interviews. But if you're serious, it's not impossible. I didn't hesitate. I'm serious. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Paperwork, home inspections, interviews. I had to answer questions I'd never considered before. Why now? What changed? Did I understand the responsibility? All I could say was, he needs someone who won't leave. And I think I need that too. Buck followed me to every appointment, like a silent endorsement. Every time a caseworker came to the house, he sat by Eli's photo on the mantel, like a living statue. The foster license came through faster than I expected. Maybe it was the story in the news. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was Buck. On a cloudy Thursday, I drove to the group home to pick Eli up. He was waiting with a backpack already on, one arm around Buck's neck. The social worker handed me a folder of documents and smiled. He said you'd come. The drive home was quiet. Eli looked out the window most of the way. Buck sat between us, tail wagging lightly. When we pulled into the driveway, Eli looked at the house and whispered, "It's big." "You'll get used to it," I said. "You can pick your room. And I got you some new socks, so Buck has something to steal." He actually laughed. Inside, I showed him the bedroom I'd set up. Soft bed, shelves for books, a desk by the window. He sat on the edge of the mattress, wide-eyed. "This is mine?" "All yours." That night, we ate dinner at the kitchen table. Spaghetti and meatballs. Buck got a small plate, too. Eli didn't talk much, but he smiled. And when it was time for bed, he didn't ask questions. Just brushed his teeth, climbed into bed, and fell asleep with Buck curled at his feet. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching them. It wasn't perfect. There were still things to figure out. Counseling, school, the legal mess of permanent custody. But in that moment, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. The next morning, I found Eli in the backyard, still in his pajamas, playing fetch with Buck. "He listens to me," he said proudly. "He knows I'm okay now." I smiled. "Yeah, I think he does." We had a long road ahead, but we weren't alone. And for now, that was enough. To be continued. 2 weeks into Eli living with me, I learned something important. Mornings were going to be different. Not bad, just different. Every day started with Buck nosing my arm at the crack of dawn, followed by the sound of Eli's laughter from the hallway. Before I could even get coffee brewing, he and Buck would be halfway through a game of sock chase, or sneaking cereal into the dog's bowl, like it was their little secret. I'd always liked quiet mornings, the slow wake-up, the hum of the fridge, the clink of a spoon in a cup. Now I had cereal on the floor and dog fur on the couch cushions. And weirdly, I didn't mind at all. Eli had settled in fast, though there were still things that gave him pause. Sudden noises, unfamiliar faces, the doorbell. He flinched the first time a delivery driver knocked. I found him crouched behind the couch with Buck pressed against him like a warm shield. "Hey," I said gently. "It's just a package, nothing to worry about." He nodded, eyes wide. He didn't say much about those moments, but I knew they meant something. I didn't push. I just let him come back out when he was ready. Every evening, we'd take Buck on a walk through the neighborhood. Eli never let go of the leash. People waved, asked questions, wanted to hear the story they'd seen on the local news. I gave polite answers, and steered the conversation away when Eli's shoulders tightened. One night after dinner, while Buck was sprawled out on the rug, Eli asked, "Is Dad really gone?" I sat across from him at the table. "Yeah, I think he fought really hard to stay with you, but his body couldn't keep going." Eli looked down. He said not to cry if he didn't come back. Said Buck would keep me safe. He was right. Buck's been watching over you like it's his job. Can he stay with us forever? Absolutely, as long as you want him here. Eli nodded. Then maybe it's okay. Not great, but okay. That night, after I tucked him in, I found myself sitting on the porch with Buck at my feet, staring out at the stars. I wasn't trying to solve anything or plan ahead. I was just there, breathing, feeling something settle in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, a call came from Eli's caseworker. She asked if I could bring him in for a family meeting. There was news. Someone had come forward. The name didn't mean anything to me at first. June Meyer, Travis's cousin, lived 2 states over in a quiet town in Illinois. She'd only just heard the story after a distant relative saw a local article online and recognized Eli's photo. "She's not demanding custody," the caseworker said carefully. "But she wants to meet him. She's willing to come here, or we can arrange a neutral location." I looked over at Eli, who was building a tower out of waffles and pretending it was a fort. "We'll come in," I said, "but I want to be there the whole time." They scheduled it for Saturday morning. Eli didn't seem nervous when I told him. Just curious. "Did Dad like her?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But maybe she'll know more about him. More stories." When we arrived at the center, Buck stayed in the truck. Eli didn't want to go in without him at first, but after a few minutes of coaxing, he agreed. As long as Buck could see the building from the window. June Meyer was in her late 50s, gray hair tied back, soft eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot, but still held a little warmth. She smiled the moment she saw Eli. "You've got Travis's eyes," she said, kneeling down so she wasn't towering over him. "He used to make that same face when he was being stubborn." Eli stayed quiet, but nodded politely. We sat in a room that felt more like a waiting area than a meeting space. A low table with puzzles, some faded posters about coping with change, and plastic chairs that squeaked. June told stories about Travis when he was a boy, how he once built a treehouse out of scrap wood and fell through the roof, how he used to sing off-key and burn toast every morning. Eli smiled a little. "Why didn't you ever visit us?" he asked softly. June's expression faltered. "I wish I had. I didn't know where your dad went. After he left his job, he stopped calling. I tried to find him, but he didn't want to be found. He said people were looking for us. Bad people." June glanced at me. "I think your dad got scared. Sometimes people get overwhelmed, especially when they're hurting." The meeting lasted an hour. At the end, June asked if she could see Eli again. Maybe spend a weekend together sometime. "That's up to him," I said. Eli looked at her, then at me, then said, "Maybe later, not yet." She nodded. "That's fair." On the way home, Eli was quiet. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "I liked her, but I don't want to go away." "You're not going anywhere, unless you want to." He looked relieved. "Okay." That weekend, we went to a local park. Buck ran circles around us, chasing squirrels and sniffing every tree like it held ancient secrets. Eli climbed the jungle gym, shouted down made-up stories about space explorers and talking dogs. It was the most animated I'd ever seen him. Afterward, we got ice cream. Buck got a pup cup. "Can we go back next weekend?" Eli asked, chocolate smeared on his nose. "Of course, as many times as you want." He leaned against me in the truck on the ride home. didn't say anything, just rested his head on my arm. That night, I sat down with my laptop and filled out the first draft of a petition for permanent guardianship. It wasn't just about giving Eli a place to stay. It was about giving him a place to belong. I sent in the forms the next day. The process wasn't quick. More interviews, another home visit, fingerprint checks, a psychological evaluation. They asked about my job, my finances, my friends. "Why do you think you're the right person to raise a child?" one of them asked. "Because I'm here," I said. "Because I didn't walk away." In the middle of all that, life kept going. Eli started at the local elementary school. He was nervous, clung to my hand the first day, but didn't cry. Buck waited in the truck until the final bell, and the moment Eli saw him again, he ran like he'd been gone for years. "He's waiting every time," Eli told me. "Like he knows exactly when I'll come out." Maybe he does. Eli brought home drawings, pictures of Buck flying like a superhero, of me with giant hands and a crooked smile. He made friends slowly, cautiously, like someone testing ice. But he made them. Every time the school called with an update, they sounded amazed at how far he'd come in such a short time. "He's polite, quiet, very bright, talks about his dad a lot, and the dog, says the dog saved him." "He's not wrong," I said. The seasons shifted. Fall brought crisp mornings and golden leaves. I bought Eli a jacket too big for him, knowing he'd grow into it. Buck hated it when the lawnmower came out, but loved chasing the leaf blower. The backyard turned into their personal battleground. We carved pumpkins, burned cookies, built a snowman when the first flakes came early. One morning, Eli asked, "When do I get to be yours for real?" I knelt down. "You already are, but we're making it official. And when that happens, I'll tell you the exact day. We'll mark it on the calendar." He nodded. "Okay. But I want cake, and Buck gets steak." "Deal." That night, I opened the box with Travis's journal again, reread the pages. I kept thinking how he must have felt, writing those words. Scared, tired, desperate. But he'd believed someone would find his son, and I had. Still, the story wasn't over. There were more questions I hadn't asked, things Eli hadn't said, and a future we were still building, brick by brick, day by day. To be continued. Eli's 5th week in the house started the same way as most of the others had. Buck sprinting out the back door before I'd even had a chance to sip my coffee, and Eli chasing after him with mismatched socks and a crooked grin. The backyard had officially become their territory. It was dotted with dog toys, sticks, one half-buried soccer ball, and what appeared to be a rogue pair of pajamas neither of them seemed willing to claim responsibility for. School was going well. Eli was starting to find his rhythm. He came home with art projects and stories about the lunch lady who gave him an extra cookie and the class pet hamster who bit 3 people in one day. He talked more now. Smiled more. Sometimes even laughed so hard he had to clutch his belly. Buck loved those moments most. He'd jump around like a fool every time Eli giggled, tail wagging wildly like he was personally responsible for the joy in the room. But we were still navigating shadows. There were nights Eli would wake up disoriented, asking for his dad. Other times, a passing ambulance siren or a sudden bang from the TV would send him stiff and quiet, eyes wide and uncertain. I'd learned not to push. Just sit beside him, maybe offer him Buck's favorite brush, or ask if he wanted to help me bake something. Distractions helped. So did Buck's presence. It was like the dog had a 6th sense for timing. He always knew when Eli needed a warm body next to him. One Thursday evening, after homework and dinner, Eli brought out a shoebox he'd been hiding in his closet. He set it carefully on the living room rug and opened it like it held something sacred. Inside were a few tiny keepsakes: a rock shaped like a heart, a dull coin, a small army man with one missing leg, and a wrinkled picture I hadn't seen before. He handed the picture to me. It was old, faded, but unmistakable. Travis, younger, maybe in his 20s, holding a newborn. Eli. "Dad gave this to me before we left the last cabin," Eli said. "Told me to keep it close." "It's a good picture," I said, handing it back. "Do you think he knew he wouldn't come back?" I paused. "I think he hoped he would. But just in case, he made sure you had something to hold on to." Eli nodded and placed the photo carefully back into the box. Then he added something new, a dried maple leaf we'd picked up on a hike the previous weekend. "For memories," he said. Saturday morning, a letter arrived from the county courthouse. I opened it slowly at the kitchen table while Eli and Buck wrestled over a chew toy in the hallway. The date was set. Our guardianship hearing would be in 3 weeks. My hands trembled slightly as I read the rest of the details. This was it. The moment we'd been moving toward, quietly, day by day. I folded the letter, tucked it into a folder, and didn't mention it to Eli right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. Later that evening, as we sat outside watching Buck try to bury a tennis ball under a pile of crunchy leaves, Eli said, "Am I staying here forever?" I looked at him, unsure how to answer without choking on the lump in my throat. "That's the plan. I want you here. Buck wants you here. Even when I get bigger and mess things up?" "Especially then," I said. "Nobody's perfect. But this is your home now." He smiled and leaned into my side. "Then I want cake that day. And steak for Buck. And streamers. And hats." "You got it." The next morning, I got a call from the sheriff's office. Detective Barnes, the one who'd been assigned to Travis's case, asked if I had a moment. "We traced a few of Travis's steps in the months before his death," he said. "Found some interesting things." "Like what?" "There was an eviction notice. He'd been renting a small place under the table, probably to stay off records. The landlord said he always paid in cash, was quiet, but toward the end he got thin. Looked sick. We also found a notebook hidden under the floorboards." "Another one?" "Yeah, but this one wasn't about Eli. It was about people. Names, transactions. Mostly scratched out, but there were references to someone named Conroy." "Conroy?" "We're still digging. Might have been a friend. Might have been someone he owed. Could explain why he was so paranoid. We're not ruling out the possibility he was being threatened." My gut tightened. "And Eli? He's safe, right?" "Absolutely. But I thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up. That night, I double-checked every lock in the house, sat on the porch with Buck while Eli slept, listening to the wind move through the trees. "Conroy," I whispered. "Whoever you are, I hope you're long gone." Buck pressed against my leg like he understood. As the hearing approached, I started preparing the house. Not just cleaning, but really preparing. I made sure Eli's room reflected him. His drawings framed on the wall, books organized on his shelf, his name on the door in wooden letters we painted together. The kitchen was stocked with snacks he liked. The fridge held his favorite apple juice, and the living room was scattered with reminders that this house was lived in. Loved in. One evening, Eli came home with a school permission slip for a field trip to a local farm. "Can Buck come?" he asked. "Sadly, no dogs allowed. But I bet Buck will be waiting at the window when you get back." "He always is," Eli said. "He always knows." I realized then that no matter what paper I signed, or what judge approved our petition. This family had already been formed. It had taken root in the ordinary moments, the way Eli talked about his day, the way Buck curled around his feet when he watched cartoons, the shared glances, the quiet understanding, the morning waffles that always ended up half-eaten by the dog. Still, the court date mattered. It was a promise, a declaration. And we were ready. Almost. A few days before the hearing, I got a call from June Meyer again. "I've been thinking," she said. "I know Eli's with you, and I believe that's where he belongs, but I want to be part of his life too. Not to take him away, just to be included." "You're welcome anytime," I said. "We'd love to have you visit." She came by that weekend, brought cookies. Let Eli show her his room and explain how Buck had his own blanket and how he once caught a squirrel, sort of, for about 3 seconds. She stayed for dinner and helped Eli beat me at a board game I didn't even know the rules to. Before she left, she pulled me aside. "You're doing right by him. He's brighter now, lighter. He's doing the same for me." She nodded. "Keep going. You're building something good." The morning of the hearing, I woke up early. Buck was already pacing, sensing the change in energy. Eli came downstairs in a button-up shirt and dress pants I'd laid out the night before. "Do I look like someone important?" he asked. "You look like someone who matters," I said. We drove to the courthouse in silence, all three of us. When we arrived, Buck had to stay in the truck. Eli gave him a long hug before we went in. The courtroom wasn't like the ones on TV. It was small, plain. Just a few chairs, a bench, a judge who looked more tired than stern. He asked me questions, then asked Eli a few more, mostly simple things. How school was going, what Buck liked to eat, whether he felt safe. "Yes," Eli said clearly. "Safe like home." The judge nodded, flipped a few pages, then looked at me. "Mr. Halbrook, are you prepared to assume full legal guardianship of Eli Meyer?" "Yes, sir." "Do you understand the responsibilities that come with this?" "I do." He signed the papers. "Congratulations," he said. "It's official." Eli turned to me. "Now it's real?" "Now it's real." When we got home, there was cake, streamers, hats. Buck got his steak, grilled to perfection, and devoured in 30 seconds flat. Eli cut the cake himself and gave me the biggest slice. Then he stood on a chair, held up a plastic cup of apple juice, and said, "To Buck, the best dog in the world." We toasted. I looked around the room, at the framed drawings, the dog hair on the rug, the laughter that echoed off the walls. We weren't finished, not by a long shot, but we were getting there. To be continued. 3 weeks after the hearing, I found myself looking at a calendar covered in stickers. Eli had started marking each day with a different color-coded label. Blue for good days, green for great ones, and red for the ones that didn't go so well. There were barely any red ones. He'd even given Buck his own column, which mostly consisted of green stickers with occasional yellow ones that Eli labeled as mud days, when Buck would roll in something mysterious and require a midweek bath. Our little family had slipped into a rhythm, like we'd been at it for years. Mornings meant breakfast together, always with Buck sitting politely for toast crusts and licking peanut butter off his nose. Evenings meant long walks or bike rides to the nearby creek. Eli liked to sit on the rocks, legs swinging over the edge, watching the water drift by as Buck sniffed along the bank. "Do you think Dad ever came here?" he asked one afternoon, looking out at the water. "I don't know," I said. "But if he did, I bet he liked it. It's peaceful." Eli nodded slowly, letting the breeze blow through his hair. "Buck always looks around like he's searching." Buck was doing just that, his nose twitching, head lifting, ears perked toward the far trees. "He probably smells 100 things we can't," I said. "Maybe he remembers something." We sat there until the sky turned pink and gold, and the frogs started calling from the tall grass. Then we walked back, Buck keeping pace between us like a sentinel. One Friday morning, I got a call from Detective Barnes again. "You remember that name? Conroy?" "Yeah, from Travis's notebook." "We found something. Or rather, someone. Russell Conroy. Used to run a towing business, now retired. He had a record back in the day. Fraud, minor theft. We paid him a visit." "And?" "He recognized Travis's photo right away. Claimed they worked a few jobs together. Said Travis was always paranoid, especially after he started coughing all the time. Conroy insists he never threatened him. But we think there was more going on. Might have been some financial pressure. Maybe a loan Travis couldn't repay." "Could he come after Eli?" "Doubtful. We've flagged him, just in case. But he's old now. Lives alone. Doesn't leave town much. We're still monitoring him." "Thanks," I said, "for keeping us in the loop." That night, I debated telling Eli. In the end, I didn't. Not yet. I didn't want to bring fear back into the house when things were just starting to feel steady. Instead, I helped Eli build a blanket fort in the living room. Buck supervised. We brought in flashlights, told made-up stories, and shared a bowl of popcorn that somehow ended up all over the floor. "You should write books," Eli said, eyes wide after I finished telling a story about a dog who solved mysteries with a talking raccoon. "Maybe I will," I said. "Or maybe you will. We could write one together. Me, you, and Buck. Deal." A few days later, I got a call from the school. Eli had gotten into a fight. I rushed down there, heart pounding. When I arrived, the principal looked more amused than upset. "He didn't start it," she said. "But he did finish it. Another boy called him weird for not having a real dad. Said only kids with dads in suits get to bring dogs to school presentations." "He brought Buck to school?" "With permission," she added quickly. "It was career week. He said Buck's job was life-saving companion. It was actually quite moving." I smiled despite myself. "Is he okay?" "Just a bruise on his elbow. We had a talk with both boys. Eli apologized for pushing. The other boy apologized for what he said. When I picked Eli up, he got in the truck and didn't say anything for a while." "You mad?" he asked. "No, not mad. He said I was weird, that I didn't belong." "Well, that boy was wrong. You belong. And not just here, with me and Buck, but in school and everywhere else you go." He was quiet a while longer. Then he said, "Can I get extra stickers on the calendar today, for courage?" "As many as you want." That weekend, we visited June Meyer again. She'd invited us to her house for a family barbecue. It was the first time Eli had been there. June had pulled out photo albums, set up lawn games, even made a dog-friendly cake for Buck. Eli wandered through her house slowly, like he was trying to remember something. He paused in the hallway, staring at a picture of Travis as a teenager. "That's him," he said. "Dad. He looks different." June smiled. "He was a little wild back then, but he always loved his family, even when he didn't know how to show it." We stayed well past sunset. On the ride home, Eli held a photo June gave him, Travis holding a fishing pole, standing in front of a lake. "He smiled like that when he caught a frog once," Eli said. "Didn't let me keep it, though. Said it belonged to the pond." He was probably right. I think so, too. Buck leaned over from the back seat and licked Eli's ear, making him laugh. "Hey, That tickles. The next week, Eli's teacher called to say he'd been selected for a school essay contest. The theme was someone who changed my life. He didn't tell me what he wrote until the night before it was due. He handed me the paper shyly. "Can you check my spelling?" I read it slowly. The whole essay was about Buck. How the dog found help when Eli was alone. How he never left. How he watched over him like a guardian angel made of fur. The final sentence read, "Buck didn't save me just once. He saves me every day by being there." "It's perfect," I said, handing it back. "Really?" "Absolutely." "Think I'll win?" "Doesn't matter. You already did." He smiled and ran off to tuck it into his backpack. A few nights later, as we got ready for bed, Eli sat on the edge of his mattress with Buck beside him. "Do you think I'll always remember Dad, even when I'm old?" "I think so," I said. "Especially the good stuff. That kind of love sticks." He nodded. "And I'll tell other people, so he doesn't disappear." "That's a good idea. Maybe I'll be a teacher, or a writer, or someone who trains dogs. You can be anything." "Can I be all three?" "Why not?" He laughed and slid under the covers. That night, Buck didn't sleep at the foot of the bed. He curled right up next to Eli, like he used to in the shed. Maybe he sensed something shifting again. Maybe he just liked being close. The days kept coming. Some were loud and messy, others quiet and sweet. There were dentist appointments and scraped knees, lost library books and surprise macaroni dinners. We fixed a leaky faucet together, built a birdhouse, spent a whole Saturday raking leaves only for Buck to jump in every pile and undo our progress. Through it all, the three of us stuck together. No longer strangers, no longer waiting. To be continued. Buck had a new hobby, waiting at the window precisely 5 minutes before the school bus turned the corner onto our street. It didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, or sunny. Buck was there, tail tapping the windowsill in a steady rhythm. I swear, he could hear that engine a mile away. Every afternoon, Eli bounded off the bus like he was launching into orbit. Some days he had a new drawing, other days a book recommendation, or a story about how he made his friend Patrick laugh so hard milk came out of his nose. But no matter the detail, Buck got the first greeting. Always. "You missed me, didn't you, buddy?" Eli would say, ruffling Buck's ears. Buck would wag and bark once, low and friendly, and then shadow him the rest of the evening like Eli was made of gold. That Tuesday, Eli came home unusually quiet. No drawings, no books, no jokes. He took off his shoes at the door, walked to the living room, and flopped on the couch. Buck followed him, nudging his side, but Eli didn't respond. I set my work laptop aside and joined them. "What's going on?" Eli shrugged. "Today was dumb?" "Dumb how?" He sighed, curling into the cushion. "There's a thing coming up. A dad day. It's for Father's Day, I guess. They want us to bring in someone, but I'm not sure I count." That one hit me in the chest. I hadn't expected it, hadn't even known the school was planning something like that. "Of course you count," I said gently. "I'm here, aren't I?" "Yeah, but it's not the same. You're not really my dad, not like before." I sat quietly beside him, letting the words settle. "I get that," I said. "And it's okay to feel that way. You loved your dad. You still do. There's room for both." "I know," he whispered, "but I don't want people asking a million questions." Buck laid his head in Eli's lap, his warm weight an anchor. Eli scratched behind his ears absently. "You want to skip it?" I asked. Eli hesitated. Kinda. But Patrick said his dad's gonna bring donuts for everyone, and there's gonna be a slideshow, and I don't want to be the only one not there. Then I'll come. Not as a replacement. Just as me. He looked at me for a long second, then smiled faintly. And Buck? We'll ask. Maybe he can wear a tie? The school said yes. That Friday, I put on my nicest button-up shirt and tied a red bandana around Buck's neck. Eli wore the blue polo he reserved for picture days and made sure his socks matched. Ready? I asked. Let's go make it not dumb. The classroom was buzzing with energy. Dads in khakis and jeans, some holding coffee cups, others balancing camera phones. Buck drew attention immediately. Kids swarmed around him, and he took it all in stride, sitting calmly while little hands patted his head and tugged gently at his fur. Eli stood beside me the whole time, shoulders a little straighter than usual. When it came time for the slideshow, each kid had a picture and a line they had to read aloud. Patrick's dad brought donuts, just like promised. Another dad juggled apples for laughs. A third tried to do a cartwheel and knocked over a trash can. Everyone clapped. Then it was Eli's turn. He walked to the front, holding a small picture of himself, Buck, and me from our backyard, one I didn't know he'd taken. He cleared his throat and read from the card in his hand. This is my person. He's not my first dad, but he's the one who stayed. He makes pancakes and fixes my bike, and Buck picked him. That means a lot. The room went still. A few people smiled. Some blinked fast. Eli added, without reading, That's Buck. He's the best dog in the whole world. Then he walked back to his seat like it was nothing. Afterward, as we walked to the truck, I said, You did good. Really good. I was nervous, he admitted. But Buck didn't move, so I figured I shouldn't either. Smart thinking. Later that weekend, we drove to visit Travis's grave. It had taken time, but with the help of June and some of the detectives, we'd been able to arrange a proper headstone in the county plot where he was buried. Eli brought a drawing he'd made of Travis holding Buck's leash, with a sun in the corner and a little house in the background labeled safe. We stood there together in silence. Eli set the drawing by the stone and placed one of Buck's tennis balls next to it. You'd like this one, he said softly. It squeaks. Buck sat between us, quiet and still. Can we come here every once in a while? Of course, I said, as often as you want. The drive back was quiet, but peaceful. That night we made grilled cheese sandwiches and hot cocoa. Buck got pieces of crust dipped in peanut butter. We played Uno, and Eli beat both of us 4 times in a row. He did a victory dance around the kitchen with Buck hopping along behind him. The next week brought a surprise. Eli's essay about Buck had won the contest. The school invited him to read it at a local assembly. Do I have to? He asked. Only if you want to. He thought about it, then said, Okay, but only if Buck can come. The principal agreed, saying it was only fitting since the essay was about him. On the day of the event, Eli walked up to the podium, a little more confident than before, paper in hand. Buck sat calmly at the foot of the stage. Eli read the essay with a clear voice. When he finished, the room clapped. Some people stood. Buck barked once, and the crowd laughed. Afterward, a reporter from the local paper asked to interview Eli. He shrugged and said, You should probably ask Buck. He did most of the work. A few days later, the article came out. Boy and dog who survived together. Now, inspire a town. I clipped it and put it on the fridge. That weekend, I caught Eli talking to Buck in the backyard. It wasn't the usual chatter. It was slower, quieter. "You know he's not going anywhere, right?" Eli asked. "Even when I mess up, even if I get mad or drop your leash or forget to brush my teeth, he's staying." Buck leaned against him gently. Eli hugged his neck. "Good. Because I'm staying too." To be continued. The summer heat rolled in slowly, like the town itself was stretching awake after a long nap. School let out, and with it came long afternoons, sprinklers, sidewalk chalk masterpieces, and sticky popsicle fingers. Eli and Buck took to the backyard like it was their personal kingdom. One morning I looked out the window and saw Buck wearing a towel tied around his neck like a cape, and Eli standing on a tree stump announcing, "Sir Barkington, protector of the yard, demands bacon." And yes, I made bacon. Eli was adjusting well. His calendar still had stickers, but now there were new categories. Purple for days with adventures, orange for special visitors, and gold stars for what he called best evers. There were a lot more gold stars lately, but change doesn't ever really leave. It just hides in the corners. One Saturday, I noticed Buck wasn't eating. He'd sniff his food and walk away. Not like him. At first, I thought maybe it was the heat. Dogs eat less in summer, right? But by the third day, I knew something was wrong. Eli noticed, too. "Why's Buck skipping dinner?" "Not sure," I said. "Might be something in his stomach. Maybe we should take him to the vet." Eli looked down. "He doesn't like the vet." "Neither do I. But it's better to be safe." We took Buck in on Tuesday. The vet was kind, a soft-spoken man with silver hair and a stethoscope that had tiny dog bones printed on it. He checked Buck over carefully, ran a few tests, and told us to wait for results. Back in the truck, Eli was quiet. "Is he sick like my dad was?" The question twisted in my chest. "We don't know yet, but Buck's strong. Let's wait and see what the vet says." The results came in the next afternoon. Nothing serious, thankfully. Some mild inflammation, likely due to something he ate or just stress. They gave us some meds and a special diet. "He'll be fine," the vet said, "but keep an eye on his energy levels. He's not a pup anymore." That was the first time I'd really thought about Buck's age. He still moved like a young dog, especially when the leash came out or a tennis ball went flying. But there were a few white hairs on his chin now. A little stiffness when he got up from naps. Nothing major, just signs of time doing its quiet work. Eli took to nursing Buck like a professional. He mixed his food, added the meds, and even sang to him softly while he ate. Buck, ever loyal, laid his head in Eli's lap during every meal. "He saved me," Eli said one night. "Now it's my turn." Meanwhile, summer moved on. We started working on a garden together, mostly tomatoes, cucumbers, and strawberries. Eli called it the snack patch. Buck supervised from the shade, his tail thumping every time Eli talked to him like a co-worker. June visited more often now, usually bringing some baked good and staying for dinner. She and Eli grew close in their own quiet way. He started calling her Aunt June without anyone suggesting it. One evening, while we were all sitting on the porch drinking lemonade, she said, "He's different, happier, more confident. He laughs like he's safe now." "He is safe," I said. Eli looked up from where he was brushing Buck. "We're all safe, even Buck." But I wasn't completely sure. Detective Barnes called again a few days later. "We had a break-in at a storage facility on the edge of town," he said. "Not much was taken, but the guy we arrested had something interesting in his possession. Your name, written on a scrap of paper." My stomach dropped. "Any idea why he'd have that?" "He claims he doesn't know. Said someone gave it to him weeks ago. The name Conroy came up again. You think it's connected to Travis? We're looking into it. Just be aware. Lock your doors. Keep your eyes open. That night, I installed extra locks on the back door and checked the batteries in every flashlight. Eli didn't ask questions, but I could tell he sensed the shift. Everything okay? He asked while brushing his teeth. Just being careful, I said. Sometimes grown-ups worry too much. He nodded, then looked at Buck. You'll bark if anything's weird, right? Buck let out a soft woof. That means yes, Eli said confidently. Days passed. Nothing happened. Still, I kept watch. Then one night, I heard something outside. It was late, after midnight. I'd just finished loading the dishwasher when Buck growled, low and deep. He was standing at the back window, ears forward, tail stiff. I moved beside him and squinted into the dark. Something shifted near the shed. A shape. Movement. I turned on the floodlights. Nothing. Buck stayed at the window for another hour, unmoving. The next morning, I found fresh footprints in the dirt, larger than mine, leading to the side of the house, then stopping. No tire tracks, no obvious sign of entry. I called the sheriff's office. They sent someone out, took photos, logged it. Might be a drifter, could be nothing. But we'll increase patrols. That day, I didn't send Eli to the summer day camp like usual. We stayed home, built puzzles, made grilled cheese. Buck stayed close to him the whole time, like a shadow with fur. That evening, I found Eli writing something at the kitchen table. What you working on? A letter, he said. For Buck, just in case. Just in case what? If anything ever happens, like if someone comes back, or if he gets sick again, I want him to know I remember. I sat down beside him. Can I read it? He nodded and slid it over. The letter was short, written in careful block letters. Dear Buck, thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for choosing Tom. Thank you for barking at stuff and being soft and warm and always knowing when I'm scared. If you ever have to go, it's okay. But please don't. Love, Eli. I swallowed hard. You've got a big heart, kid. He deserves it. We folded the letter and put it in Buck's toy bin, tucked behind a worn-out stuffed squirrel. The next few days were quiet again. The garden flourished. Buck started eating normally. We even went for a picnic by the lake. But the feeling of unease didn't disappear. One night, I heard footsteps outside again. This time on the front porch. I opened the door fast, floodlights blaring. No one there. But a piece of paper had been tucked under the doormat. It had one word. Watching. To be continued. The piece of paper hadn't blown onto the porch. That much I knew the second I held it in my hand. The corners were too crisp, the folds too clean. Someone had placed it there deliberately, and they'd done it while we were home, while we were inside. While Buck, with his aging hips and sharp instincts, lay by the front window, lifting his head at every passing car like he was still a sentinel, even if his legs didn't let him chase shadows anymore. I brought the paper inside, slid it into a plastic bag, and locked the doors. Every single one. I told Eli the wind knocked something off the porch. He didn't push, but I caught him glancing at Buck more than usual, like he was trying to read something in the dog's stillness. The next morning, I went straight to the sheriff's department. Barnes met me in his office. Watching? He repeated, turning the note over. You didn't see anyone? No, but Buck reacted. He doesn't bark much anymore, but that night he stood by the front door for nearly an hour. Barnes nodded. You did the right thing bringing this in. Could be someone messing around. Could be someone from Travis's past. We'll look into it." I left the office with more questions than answers. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to live in fear. More importantly, Eli wasn't going to live in fear. I added new motion lights around the house, installed cameras, even one on the shed. Buck watched me from the porch like he approved. His eyes followed me every step of the way, the old soldier still doing his job. Eli didn't ask questions, but that night when I tucked him in, he said, "If something bad happens, Buck will protect us again, just like before." "Nothing bad's going to happen," I said. "We've come too far." The next day was bright, a perfect golden kind of day that begged to be used. I canceled everything, told Eli we were going on an adventure. We drove up to the state park where the trees stretched high and the trails wound like old stories. Eli packed a bag with snacks and Buck's favorite squeaky toy. We hiked until the sun was high and the breeze smelled like pine. "Remember when we lived in the woods?" Eli asked as we sat on a rock near a stream. "You do?" "Some of it. Mostly the cold, the dark. But Buck made it okay." Buck was lying at Eli's feet, ears perked, alert even now. "I'm glad you don't have to live like that anymore," I said. "Me too." When we got home, there was nothing on the porch. No new notes, no signs of trespass. But at 3 a.m, Buck let out a growl that pulled me out of bed like a slap. He stood in the hallway, rigid, staring toward the back of the house. I grabbed the flashlight and the baseball bat I kept in the coat closet. Buck led the way. The back door was closed, but outside the window I caught a flash. A figure. Someone moving. I flipped the light on, shouted, "Hey!" The figure bolted. I ran outside barefoot, flashlight bouncing over the lawn. Buck was slower now, but he stayed close. Whoever it was had already vanished by the time I reached the edge of the yard. But they'd left something behind. Taped to the shed door was another note. "You took what was mine." I stared at the words, every muscle in my body tense. I called Barnes again. They came, collected the note, promised to sweep the area. I stayed up until sunrise. By morning, I'd made another decision. We weren't waiting anymore. With Barnes's help, I went through the files again. Names, connections, faces. I looked at every person Travis had worked with, every mention in his journals. One name kept resurfacing. Russell Conroy. Barnes got a warrant. We visited his property. Old farm, long overgrown, tools strewn across a collapsing porch. Inside, the place smelled of dust and rot. In the back room, we found newspaper clippings, stories about Travis, the boy in the woods, and photos of Eli, of me, taken from a distance. Conroy wasn't there, but he'd been watching. It took 3 more days to find him. He was squatting in an abandoned gas station, not far from where Travis used to live. When they brought him in, he didn't say much. Barnes told me later, he thought Travis stole from him. Money. Some kind of scam gone bad. When Travis disappeared, he started looking for the kid. Figured there might be something left. He wanted Eli? Or what Eli might have. There was no logic to it, just bitterness. They charged him with stalking and harassment. No evidence he tried to break in, but enough to keep him away. A restraining order was filed. Patrols increased. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I told Eli a man from the past had been caught. Someone who was confused and angry, but he wasn't going to bother us anymore. Eli didn't ask for more details. Buck knew, he said. He always knows. That weekend, we celebrated. June came over. We made pizza from scratch. Buck got extra crust and a dog-safe cookie shaped like a bone. Eli brought out a new calendar. This one didn't have stickers, just drawings. Us in the garden, us at the lake, Buck on the porch, wearing sunglasses. "What's this for?" I asked. "It's the new story," he said. "The one after the hard part." Later that night, we sat on the porch. Buck rested at Eli's feet. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass. Eli looked up at the stars. "You think Dad sees us?" "I think he does. And I think he'd be proud of you." "Of Buck, too?" "Especially Buck." Eli smiled. "Then I think we're doing okay." We were, and we would be, because Buck had brought us together. And no matter what had happened, or what would come, we were a family now. The kind built not by blood or luck, but by love and loyalty, and one shivering dog who refused to give up. The end.